Welcome to Spiritual Insurgency. I'm Jason Lupo, joined today with my co-host in studio, Aaron Lujan,
What's happening, Jason?
and also joining us as a guest today, Vanessa Johnson, attorney at law, joining us from somewhere. I don't
Tampa,
remember which state.
Florida. Hey guys, nice to be back with you, and thanks for inviting me.
I was like,
Sorry,
that's pretty quick to go to a commercial break.
got a little distracted.
That is the earliest commercial break I've ever experienced. We've never even had commercial breaks on the show before.
You do
Well,
now.
we just got monetized, so that's why we have commercial breaks now. But today we're talking about something really important. Robert Morris and Gateway Church are now being accused of RICO charges. So I thought we would start by just passing this off to Vanessa. Vanessa, can you fill us in on what RICO charges are?
Okay, so RICO charges, that law came into existence, I think, in the 70s. It was created because of mafia and, to thwart the organized crime and the corruption and things like that. But since then, it's been codified. There's a criminal statute, and it's also used civilly. So in the context of a civil action like we're dealing with here with Gateway, we'll get into it in a minute, but just to give you an overview, the plaintiffs are asserting that Gateway and others, such as the other two defendants, Robert Morris and another individual, that they engaged in this type of criminal activity. And in doing so, what it allows the plaintiffs to get, if they succeed, is triple damages and their attorney's fees paid. So with a RICO charge, what they're asserting is that it's a pattern of racketeering activity, and they're saying that it was done through mail or wire. So things like, it can be emails, it can be text messages, it can be anything that's, on the phone, or even, just through the mail, the regular mail, which people don't usually use anymore. It could be email, obviously. And so there's two different things that they're alleging. So they're saying that, and we can get into this, and you can let me know if you want to cut me off and if I've gone too far in that regard. And
Sure.
but there's two assertions essentially. The first is that this group of plaintiffs, which are the congregants, some of them, it's a class action. So there's a couple of named plaintiffs, but there's a whole group of people that have been harmed. Okay, so they've asserted the class action, and they're saying that ties that were induced, they were asked to give money for certain things, missions, other things, that those ties, 15% of what they gathered, was supposed to go to these certain, missions, and it didn't happen. So that's one aspect of the assertion of the accusation. The other one is that from the pulpit, Robert Morris said that, hey, if you're not satisfied, you can just ask for your tithes back. And it's my understanding that he said that more than one time. So when people took him up on it, they refused. So first off, what this class of plaintiffs did first, they wanted to see the financials. They wanted to see, is the money that you've been asking us all these years and saying that 15% per year is going to these certain missionaries, is that in fact happening? They refused to disclose it. And then secondly, when they asked for those tithes back, they refused to give it to them. So they engaged in conversations with the church to try to get these things remedied before taking action, but it didn't happen. So that's why they filed the lawsuit.
Right. So my understanding is that this meets the definition of fraud under the RICO law because it's looking like they engaged in what RICO law would require, a pattern of racketeering activity, and that is indicative of the continual ask for tithing, but then it met the requirements of it needing to cross state lines because they were asking this on the website, they were asking this through mail for presumably people that were out of state, and then it was also I think what also made this more potentially fraudulent is that they made the promise of the money back guarantee and then actually refused to do
Right.
good on that. Am I understanding this correctly?
Very, very well said. because that is an important point, why it gets to the federal jurisdiction and why they can use the RICO Act. Because the church is in Texas, but their congregation is not just in Texas. Just like you said, they have the reach everywhere. It could be other places in this country. It could be other parts of the world. But yes, they have a very, very broad reach because they have the ability to reach so many people through, the way that they set up their media, through their church. And that's why they've used this statute. Initially, though, and I'm not sure if you know this, when they first filed their lawsuit back in October of 2024, it did not include RICO. There were 2 counts,
Right.
and it was the misrepresentation and fraud and the breach of contract. Those were the 2 counts. But then this year, so exactly a year later, they filed an amended complaint, and that's when they added 2 more counts, one of which is the RICO. That's actually the 4th count. And the 3rd count is just a specific count against Robert Morris and Steve Doolin. And it's fraud, intentional and negligent misrepresentation in regard to them. Those weren't
Now,
there in the
now,
first one.
yeah, no, that's important to note because it almost seems like it escalated. Would that be a fair way of characterizing it? That that's like they didn't get what they wanted, so then they kind of threw an extra grenade, so to speak, into the war.
I'm not sure how they decided to do that, but sometimes, things just naturally evolve.
Okay.
And even when you're litigating, you're talking to people, you're doing investigation. And this went on for a year where they were going back and forth with motions. So they had a whole year to do the work and, gather more information. And they probably decided, hey, let's just go ahead and consider this. And that's what they did. They considered, let's add this on. Why not? It fits. And I'm not sure exactly what the catalyst was to that, but here we are. We now have an amended complaint. And what's going to happen now is that Gateway, Robert Morris, and now there's only one other guy, Steve Doolin. I'm not sure. He was an elder there. And
Correct.
I'm not sure exactly if they all have separate attorneys. I would think that they do.
And
But
is Tom Lane in that bunch?
say the name again.
Tom Lane.
So no, he's not. He's
Okay.
he's mentioned in the pleading. So that's an interesting thing. Let me just share this. When you have RICO, you can allege that people participated in furtherance of whatever it is, the fraudulent activity, the engagement, and they might not be named as defendants. And that's what's happening here. There's only 3 defendants that are listed now. It initially started with 5. Initially, it was Gateway, Robert Morris, Tom Lane, Kevin Grove, and Steve Doolin. Well, now Tom Lane and Kevin Grove are out. They got
Hmm.
dismissed.
Okay.
So they have
What is
3 remaining.
what's the difference between just an ordinary mail fraud allegation and allegation of RICO?
Well, here you have to have at least 2 going on in a year with RICO in a 10-year period. So you could just have a single action of mail fraud, and that wouldn't rise to the level of RICO.
So this would be considered like an ongoing issue that Robert Morris Gateway Church has essentially defrauded their congregants for years at a time. It's not just a single incident. This has been going on a long time, and that's what brings in the racketeering charge.
Right, because if you think about it this way, if they're disseminating anything from their church, right? They're trying to get people to tithe, and they're sending out a pamphlet, they're sending out an email, they're sending out a CD, whatever it is, that's dissemination, that's over the wire, it's media. That's been going on for a decade is what they're asserting. So that's why they can use the RICO statute, because it's going to be way more than 2 times. They're going to be able to show just even on their website what they do, and they're probably still engaging in things like that where they're asking for ties. If they're doing any engagement like that over wire, over email, then that would suffice.
I have a question, Vanessa. I want to back up just a little bit because 3 weeks ago, Robert Morris pleaded guilty to sexual abuse charges. Praise God. I want to take a moment. Thank you, Lord, for bringing justice to Cindy Clemenshire and her family. It was such a beautiful thing to see. So my question is, as I was looking at this RICO charge case, I couldn't see the connection between the two. Can you speak to any connection at all to these two cases? Because it just seems like the timing was very interesting. 3 weeks ago, Robert Morris pleads guilty. Now we have these RICO charges.
Yeah, and I don't really know what to make of it. I just know that they are definitely, on the forefront. Gateway is on the forefront, and it has been since Cindy Clemenshire came out, right? So she came out in June of 2024, and then he stepped down. And then after that, just a couple months later, October of 2024, that's when this class action was filed. That happened first.
Right.
That's the first thing. And then, remember in March, that's when he was criminally charged in March. And then I believe it was after that, I'd have to look, but do you know about Cindy Clemenshire and her father also? They have another lawsuit. It's in state court. It's in Texas. And they
No.
are suing Gateway and multiple people as well as Robert Morris for defamation.
Hmm. Because I believe there was some,
For
I
re-
don't know if
re-
the legal term, but there was some slander or something of that nature against the father, almost implicating him in public that he was somehow responsible.
No, I'm not
No?
sure if
Okay.
that's one of it. It's more on the lines of they were referring to her as a young lady when she was a child. Remember,
Right.
she was only 12 when she was
She was a
abused,
child being abused. He was not in an extramarital affair with a woman, please.
which he
That is
intimated
insulting.
it was. I mean, he led people to believe that it was just a moral
Yeah.
failure.
Well, the fact that he couldn't look her in the eye during the statement says everything one can say about this person. But
Yeah,
no, thank you for addressing that. I wanted to ask you about how would the church had the church honored the refund policy, would the RICO charges you think would have ever been assessed? Because my understanding is that the elders released a public statement saying that they've done internal audits that go, and I quote the elder who published the statement many years back and said that they have been found to be very generous. There's no wrongdoing whatsoever. But yet, the plaintiffs in this case are being denied the ability to look at the books to determine where their tithe money has gone. So my question is, had the church obliged the request, would these RICO charges you think even had come up to begin with?
probably not. And you know what it's very similar to? Cindy Clemenshire in 2005 or 2007 asking for $50,000. Remember that? She was asking
Yes.
Robert Morris for $50,000 for counseling and he refused to give it to her. And then
Yes.
boom, you know, over 20 years later, then he gets charged. So here, that's all that the congregation wanted. These parties that are the plaintiffs, they went to the church. They said, hey, let us look at the books. So you brought up something very interesting. And then they said, no, we went back, we did an internal audit, as if to say, hey, just take my word for it. Well, they're not going to take your word for it. So they were asking if they could see it. And they wouldn't allow it. And so that, I believe, coupled with the fact that, hey, we're also asking for our ties back now because, hey, we remember that from the pulpit, Robert Morris said, we can give it back to you if you ask. And then they weren't doing that either. So I think that they kind of had their hands tied and they were either going to get run over or they were going to take action. And they decided to take action.
Now, these are civil complaints. This is a civil complaint with the RICO allegation. What is the chance or the likelihood that this could be pursued criminally?
That's a very good question. I thought about that. I don't think so. I mean, anything can happen. Is it possible? Sure. Is it? We don't know everything, right? We're on the outside looking in. But if they're under the microscope, meaning Gateway and others, other churches, and if that is something that is being tasked by the FBI or any other, government entity, that could potentially happen. People could be charged criminally.
Well, going back to the church not showing the books, and I also must add that there was a confidentiality clause that was granted to Gateway Church that they wouldn't even make this information public if they presented the books. Is that your understanding of looking at the case?
N- No, there isn't. There's no confidential here as far as this case. If there's anything like an NDA or something like that, it doesn't have any bearing here because this is
Well,
a lawsuit
in the
that
article, the Julie Roy's article, I read that they were granted a protective order of confidentiality, is how it was phrased, in exchange for the audits. Um, maybe I missed. Did I maybe misunderstand that?
maybe it's something I missed. So
Okay.
I looked at the actual pleadings and what a pleading is the actual filing, right? It's the actual filing that the attorney files and the actual
Okay.
formal complaint that gets filed in the United States District Court. So I look at that to look at what the facts are and all of the allegations and the counts that are contained
Okay.
therein.
Well, whether there was a protective order of confidentiality or not, Gateway Church had an opportunity to oblige their congregants and provide the books, provide the evidence of where this money was going, because I imagine, like many churches, Gateway was very voluntarily proud about their generosity. That's indicated in the recent statement by the elder that they have been very generous church.
Right.
So if they knew that this was, unless they were blindsided that this could potentially bring RICO charges, and maybe they were, it just seems like if Gateway Church was acting in good faith, they would have either been smart enough to avert a RICO charge and say, we don't want to go there. We don't want these types of federal charges. We don't want to be construed as a mafia. Let's go ahead and show everybody in good faith, or at least show the people that are asking in confidence what they want to see.
Sure.
Because if they didn't do it and they were aware that these charges could come, that would only imply that they must be hiding something far more nefarious if they were exposed, if their books became exposed to these people. Do you agree with that line of reasoning?
It could be. And another thing is people just don't like to be told what to do, right?
Sure.
And another thing is based upon my experience just seeing this kind of, following this stuff, they think that they can get away with a lot. They're
Mhm.
used to that. They feel like they don't have any accountability. They don't have to answer to anybody. And that seems to be the theme. And if they're
Yes.
operating in that type of a setting and they think that they can just get over on anybody, think about it. Just like you said, these people are coming to them and asking for the books. What did they really think that those people were just going to say, "Okay, we're going to go away now with our tails between our legs and just walk away?" They probably thought that they could bully people. And then, because now Gateway is all over the news, maybe, there are attorneys that say, "Hey, I'm interested in taking this case. It's going to give me a lot of exposure." And maybe they just didn't think that through.
Yeah, I've noticed that this is sort of the modus operandi of these mega church people, is that they have this bravado, this pride about them. It's almost like as if they've gotten away with so much for so long that maybe they've been somehow convinced that they're invincible. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, very much so. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Vanessa. In the lawsuit, it argues the Gateway Church um, operated as an enterprise or criminal enterprise. So this, when I read this, it transformed this from a couple bad actors that had a falling, as we would use Christianese and church language, or that
Right.
they, had a moral failing. We have all these great. Sorry, I'm a cradle Catholic, so a lot of this language is very humorous to me. But I call it, you screwed up. Okay,
Huh.
these people didn't screw up individually. This RICO lawsuit reeks of institutional corruption. So it takes on a whole new meaning when Gateway Church is alleged to be operating as a criminal enterprise. So my question here, Vanessa, is in addition to what is there anything additional above and beyond what we read in the Julie Roy's article about the church's structure, their finances, their leadership hierarchy, that may indicate that they were facilitating or concealing crimes and protecting their brand?
I think that the article did a great job summarizing it and said just that. And it's contained and you can see it if you wanted to go into the pleading and see it because it names different people. They're not named as defendants, a party to the action, but they're named in there. You know, for instance, let me just give you an example. The CPA, there was a CPA that was doing the internal audit and was asking questions. They didn't like that. And so Tom Lane, well, he was
He was
actually,
fired, right?
he, yeah, I don't think these
And he
people work
wasn't
there
even
anymore.
allowed to do a full. He wasn't looking for corruption. He was auditing from a different manner. Is my understanding of that?
Well, they didn't like the questions. So here's another example of that. So the CPA that was hired in 2011, he only lasted until 2014. He was noticing discrepancies. So he goes to Tom Lane telling him that he cannot be a part of the financial irregularities that he found and he wanted to address it. And he says, if these things can't be addressed, I'm going to need to resign. And then lo and behold, Tom Lane says, okay, we'll accept your resignation. And that's how they handled it. They said, I spoke to Robert over the weekend and we agreed to accept your resignation. So they're all in concert. Tom Lane, Robert Morris, there's other leaders, Kevin Grove, Ernest Reed Grafke, Peter Hirsch. They're all named in here, but it doesn't mean that they're all defendants. So yes, bottom line, they are all working together. They're in concert. They're working on this scheme. That's the allegation. And it's a criminal scheme. And they're doing these things. They're inducing people to give tithes, give them money. They're telling them something that's not true. That's what the allegation is. Okay. Remember, that's what those allegations are, that from the pulpit, from that church, various people are telling congregation and other members, give money because it's going to go to this, but it actually didn't go to this. And they could have
So
easily just proved if it really did go to that, they could have just opened up their books and say, here, it did go, but it didn't. And internally with this CPA, he finds that only 3 million went when if 100 million's coming in by math, logically, it would be 15 million a year, but that's not what they found. So
So we have a question in the chat. Can people bring that charge to Benny Hint and Kenneth Copeland?
yes, I love the fact that that's the first question because Aaron, remember, I don't know if you recall, but after you asked me to be on the show and I started looking at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this lawsuit is going to open up the floodgates for any church anywhere in the United States where this can be established. So for instance, if you go to a church and they're telling you, and I have plenty of examples of this just based upon my own channel that I deal with, any church, and they're saying, hey, today we're taking up a fund. It's a building fund. We're building the new children's ministry, right? And our goal is $100 million. Okay. And so that's what they're doing. And they're like, we're going to take this up every Sunday, the first Sunday of the month for the next year. And guess what? Lo and behold, they don't build one. Well, that's it's similar to what happened with Gateway, but even more obvious. There's no building, right? You can see that. In Gateway, you're looking for the books to see if the funds went and were dispersed. But that's what this opens itself up to. So, yes.
yeah, along those lines, I don't think. I mean, I can't recall in recent times that there's ever been a time in church history where there's been this zeitgeist or this effort, this collective concern of churches abusing their positions of power and maybe being involved in fraud. Now that it feels like we've entered this new season, um, could this be a landmark case and could this be like in the books as legal precedent? So I
Uh-huh.
guess just trying to solidify that last question, is this in legal terms, could this be like a legal precedent that future cases could look to and say, this is a landmark case. This is how we're going to proceed moving forward.
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, historically or currently, do churches, especially in the evangelical world, have any legal obligation to share their books with their congregants or with government or with media or with anyone for that matter?
No, nothing that I
No.
know of, unless they enter into an agreement. If they have their board of directors, they've got their rules, and they allow that. That's something that would they have the ability to control. But as far as this one's a little bit different from that, because remember, it's that asking for the money for a certain purpose, right? And if
Right.
they didn't do that, if it was just tithes, just generally, hey, just give us, just if you want to tithe, and there wasn't any promise made with what those monies that they were collecting was going to go to, we wouldn't be here right now. That's why I gave you the
Right.
example of the building.
Yeah, I mean, I think the elephant in the room when along with the regards to this question is that the RICO charges are sniffing around the fact that people suspect that leadership has been enriching themselves while knowingly misleading their congregation. So, if that's actually what's happening, could this RICO charge allow the courts to open up the books and expose maybe housing allowances, maybe unreasonable salaries in contrast to the biblical mandates? Maybe we're going to find discretionary forms without labels or called benevolence or ministry related budgets. So my question is, will the courts and law enforcement have that authority, and could this potentially open up to the public?
Okay. So that's a loaded question. Let me try to break it down
I
here.
asked loaded questions. Sorry,
It,
Vanessa.
that's okay.
I'm
For
from the
in the
West.
con
We stay loaded. Sorry. Go ahead.
in the context of this particular lawsuit, there's this thing called discovery. Well, all lawsuits have them, but you're aware of that, right?
Yes.
Discovery is when you start taking depositions, you start asking, you submit interrogatories, meaning they're questions to the other side that they have to answer, accept, deny or agree, or hand over some documents. I deal with it all day long in my practice. You go before the judge because one side doesn't want to give over something, but that's what that whole discovery process, you're given that opportunity to get the information that you need, and you have to take the deposition of somebody, or you have to subpoena something. So inadvertently, just to try to hit your question in regard to the other things like, allowances and things like that, those things could get uncovered, right? They could. However, the other side could try to block it with a motion in limine, just to be specific. They could say, you're not allowed to go into this area because it's not relevant. It's not material to the issues at hand. But, discovery typically is pretty broad. And so it'll be up to that that federal judge in regard to what areas they're going to allow in. But obviously, the plaintiffs are asserting fraud, misrepresentation, breach of contract. So if any of those things where they're going delving into the discovery, and then, they find something else, well, then they could come back and actually do a superseding or not, no, sorry, that would be in criminal. They could do an amended complaint. And then just like they did here, right? Because it first started out in October of 2024 with just 2 counts: the misrepresentation, the breach of contract. Then a year later, perhaps they found more information, and then they come up with the RICO and then the other specific count against Robert Morris. Well, they can continue on in discovery and file a third amended complaint and add other counts in there as well. Remember, this is civil, so you use the word counts, and then in criminal, it's charges. And then, hey, if something gets uncovered and then somebody notifies the FBI and says, hey, this could be criminal, well, then it's up to the FBI to investigate, and that goes into a different area of investigation and would be criminal.
So I think we covered this a little bit, but just for clarification's sake, this is a question in the chat. What compensation are the plaintiffs seeking? Can they be awarded punitive damages in addition to the amount of money they tied over the years?
So they're seeking $100 million for the class because this is a class action. And yes, they could get punitive damages. Let me just look at the relief just to make sure and see that they listed it all. But typically they list everything in there.
Is that punitive damages the treble, the 3 times the amount, or is
N-
that different?
It's different. Punitive damage, think about punishment. So punitive damages are to punish. So somebody could be filing a lawsuit and they're like, hey, my damages are just $25,000, right? And they go to a jury trial. But then they're also asking punitive damages. And then the jury comes up with that number and then they give them $1 million for punishment. So here, this is what they're asking for. All available damages allowed by law, including interest, in an amount to be proven at trial. So they're not giving a specific amount. The monetary relief is likely to exceed 100 million. So I think that's the base, is the 100 million. Also, equitable relief, that means that they're asking for specific performance. So they could say, hey, even though we win and we get this money, we still want to see the books. That would be equitable relief. And then the award of attorney's fees and costs. Now, back to the treble damages, just think it's triple damages. So because they have the RICO count, they are allowed 3 times the damages that they're seeking. So if we just use 100 million just as the base, just for the purpose of this hypothetical, if they were awarded those damages of 100 million by the jury, well, with the RICO, they would be awarded 300 million, up to 3 times. For the class. Remember, it's not just going to 1 or 2 people. And the class is unknown at this time, how many people are involved.
Now, we know of the Cindy Clemenshire case. In the event that other SA cases come up and they emerge while this RICO case is being investigated and ongoing, could this SA cases, let's assume that there's ones that come up in the future, could that connect to the financial element of the RICO case, making this worse for Gateway and then potentially other churches and ministries in the future if this becomes a landmark case?
Right. I mean, I don't know, the way that RICO would apply if you're talking about SA, it would, they would have to establish there's an enterprise and that's what they're doing. They're covering that up in order to advance this enterprise. We saw something like that with the Sean Combs case. But yes, I mean, bottom line is this could definitely be a landmark case. It can open up liability civilly for any church, any ministry, and criminally. Because you can also make an argument if there is, multiple SAs, well, that could potentially fall under criminal RICO as well.
Yeah, because we're looking at the Combs case, my understanding is that because there was so much SA going on in the Combs case and there was money involved, that I think the argument was made that this was a criminal enterprise profiting off of sexual abuse. And so
Right.
I'm wondering if that same principle could
Yes.
eventually make that connection here in this particular RICO case with Gateway.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Because we already have, I mean, the founder of Gateway pleaded guilty to SA, and would I would be hard pressed to think this is the only case that existed in this man's life, or anyone at that church for that matter.
Very, very difficult to think that she was the only victim just because of, what we know, that typically there's other victims out there. But the thing is, those victims, that if there are any out there, they may not want to come forward at this point.
And that's unfortunate, and I understand. I mean, it's complicated, right? I mean, outsiders want to see justice being done, but nobody understands what it's like to be a victim.
That's right.
Certainly don't. So I can only extend empathy and prayer to these people in the situation. But I wanted to ask you, Vanessa, and we have Vanessa Johnson, attorney, YouTuber, with us today. What an honor to have her. I wanted to ask you, Vanessa, about the defense strategy undoubtedly Gateway's lawyers are going to argue that this is an attack on religious freedom and that these are internal church matters that are protected under free speech laws. How do you expect that to be their primary defense? And if so, how do you expect that to play out in court?
That is going to be their defense, right? Not only are they going to try to knock down every argument that the plaintiffs make, but there are these interest groups, and they will come alongside as much as they can and support the defendants. So I'm going to read for you just a paragraph that's contained in one of these briefs. It was a brief that was filed in support of Gateway Church when Gateway and the other defendants were filing their motions to dismiss the initial complaint from last year. So
Okay.
just so you understand what's happening here, First Liberty Institute. So they are, let me just get what they say they are. They are a nonprofit public interest law firm dedicated to defending and restoring religious liberty. And they provide pro bono legal representation to all institutions of faith. So they're coming alongside Gateway Church to support them, and they're arguing that this case should not go forward because it's going to be harmful to churches, that they're not going to be able to do what they normally do. They're saying that the claim would proceed, if it were to proceed, the complaint would create a dangerous precedent that invites theological disputes to become court disputes and threaten to chill religious speech and exercise. And they say allowing disgruntled congregants, saying which few churches lack, to haul the church into court because they disagree with its use of their tithes opens a Pandora's box of litigation into every aspect of a church's internal decision making. And in order to preserve the freedom to practice religion, they're asking that this complaint get dismissed. So that is exactly what they're going to be arguing, that it shouldn't be in court, that it has no place in court. These are issues that should be dealt with in church, and saying that these people are all disgruntled congregants. We hear that all the time. I just did a video yesterday on a case. It's the same thing. It's the same argument. That's what they all say, that they're disgruntled. Not that they have a valid concern or a valid case, but that they're just disgruntled.
Disgruntled. Yes. Jason, you had a question?
I mean, this is not a conversation about theological differences. This is not a conversation about what's being preached. It's a conversation about Gateway Church told its congregants that a certain percentage of the money was going to go to overseas missions, and it didn't. And going back to Aaron's previous question about the connection with the SA cases and these RICO charges, where do we see there being a connection between the emails that go back and forth across state lines, the mail that goes back and forth across state lines, and the cover-up of Cindy Clemishire's abuse? And does that play a role in potential RICO charges?
Jason, I am so glad you brought that up. I recall being on Everett's show, Ohio for Freedom, when Cindy and her father first filed the defamation suit against Robert Morris. And that was my first impression. I said, where's the RICO charge? I think because they were covering it up to advance their brand to sell books, to sell, whatever it is, their CDs, whatever programs, disseminate product. It's all to sell. And I remember saying that back then. So that was several months ago. So, could we see an amendment now in that complaint that Cindy Clemishire has with her father against Gateway Church and other members and Robert Morris? Yes, I would say so, because I thought so back then.
So if the defense team decides to pursue this defense, which you expect them to, it seems to me that they're going to try to take this to playing the semantics game with the definition of missions. Is that where you kind of see this going if they get their way? Well,
I
missions means one thing, but they meant another kind of thing.
certainly they could argue that, but I also think that they're trying to get around the breach of contract, just like you said, and Jason said, hey, we're here because you said this is what we're going to use the money for. And they're going to dance around that and say, well, you can't take, I'm just saying, for instance, you can't take what we say seriously. We're just trying to get ties. And we never said that it was going to be this, this, and that. But that's the whole dispute, right?
Yeah.
That's the crux of the matter. Yeah, they're going to come in and say, well, you didn't, it wasn't reasonable for you to think that we were going to use all the money for this or that. They're going to say it wasn't reasonable. There's usually that term in law, the reasonable person standard. It wasn't reasonable. We didn't induce anybody. We didn't make a specific claim or agreement. We didn't enter into a contract. Those are the things that they're going to argue.
How far can this go once this RICO case is open? Because I read in the Julie Roy's article that there's broad discovery tools that could be made available by the Department of Justice. Can you speak to that? What are they referring to when they say that these broad discovery tools could be available, and how far can this go? How deep can they dig?
So I saw that mentioned in the article and I flagged it because let me just address that. So there's broad discovery in every case. So it doesn't have anything to do necessarily with RICO. Any lawsuit, you're going to have the ability to do discovery. Is it necessarily broader? It could be because there are things that they have to, it is, it can be argued that yes, it could be a bit broader when you have a RICO because they have to prove certain things. And there's a lot of components to that, right? But as it relates to the prosecutor, I think you said the Department of Justice, they have no bearing on this civil case. So when you start talking about FBI, Department of Justice, prosecutor, charges, that's criminal. And there was a portion in that article that was a bit confusing because it said that RICO allows prosecutors in this case to take action against the entire church and charge multiple people in the same case. Well, there isn't any evidence that this is being pursued or investigated criminally. So I'm not sure what they were actually saying in that. This is a civil case. So they refer to the prosecutor. There is no prosecutor in this civil case. Is that what you were referring to? That
Yeah,
statement?
I was referring to that statement because it just piqued my interest when they said that there could be like these further tools available by the Department of Justice, and it kind of had the feeling of it being a criminal case. So I got a little confused there.
Unless there's something we don't know, and that was why it was added in there, but I am not aware of any federal criminal investigation. But the article does say it allows prosecutors in this case, but in this case is the civil case, so I'm not sure if they just conflated it.
Right. What do you expect the fallout to be? So let's say we, 6 months later, I don't know how long these cases take. What do you expect the fallout to look like
Oh, ultimately, you mean after, the discovery and
after the discovery, after the RICO charges go through its full course, and the actions take its course, the legal process comes to a completion? Where do
okay,
you expect this to? What do you expect this to look like for those named plaintiffs? I'm sorry, defendants, and the
class.
church as a whole. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would think that they should settle. So that should be their ultimate goal right now is to try to settle and not go through discovery. They have a window of time to do that.
Do you think their books will get exposed to the public?
Not necessarily. I don't think it'll be to the public. I think in this case, I mean, they're asking for equitable remedies, right? And that would
Right.
be the ability to see the books. That doesn't mean that the whole public gets to see them. It's the plaintiffs that have standing. So the class is they're the ones that are asking to see the books, right? So it wouldn't we don't have you and I, we don't have standing to say, "Hey, we get to see it too." That's not
Right.
how it works. So, I mean, the best that they can do, okay, just with the four corners of this, right? The best that can happen right now is for the parties to enter into negotiations to settle it, because then that puts an end to any further not knowing what's going to happen, any more work and time and effort on it, and just reaching a conclusion so everybody knows where they are and what's going to happen. As this goes on and progresses, we've already seen it. We saw it with Robert Morris. You didn't want to give Cindy Clemenshire $50,000. Well, now you've got a lawsuit by her and her father against you in Texas in state court. Now you just pled guilty to criminal charges, which you didn't think was going to happen. And then now there's this, and that's not by Cindy Clemenshire, but this, it's not going to end. And it's like, to me, it's like, when are you going to figure out that it's not going to end for you? Right?
Yeah, this reminds me of when I got in trouble in high school and I would just make excuses and obfuscate and hide, and my mom would famously say, "You're just digging your own grave, brother. You're just
Well,
digging your own grave."
I guess we can say that about them. They are digging their own grave. The best, in my opinion, this would just be my opinion, I would say, hey, let's cut our losses. Let's try to enter in negotiations and end this.
You would think so, but sometimes pride comes before a fall, right?
Yep, I've heard that.
Yeah, I've heard that too. No, this is very interesting, and this is my selfish $1 million question because Jason and I are sitting in Colorado Springs, and I'm sure you remember Robert Morris used to be the overseer of New Life Church, and
Right.
we've had quite the last couple of months here in Colorado Springs with New Life, and we now have Brady Boyd, who's was very well connected to Robert Morris, resigned from New Life Church as a senior pastor. What does this RICO case, if any, have any implication to New Life Church in Colorado Springs?
I would need to refresh my recollection in regard to the allegations with New Life.
Well,
I
essentially,
remember,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, sorry to interrupt you. Did you want me to let you
No, go
finish
ahead
there?
and tell me, because I
You-
I
wha-
I remember
yeah,
it was the cover up, and that they were claiming they didn't know about Robert Morris, and that Brady Boyd didn't allegedly know, but the allegation was he did know and they brought him on anyway. Is it that
exactly.
context?
That
Okay.
is exactly what happened. And now Brady Boyd is gone, and they've fired the elders that were proven in the court affidavits to have known. And so now we're in a situation where we have allegedly a board that doesn't know, which I don't buy, and a senior pastor that allegedly doesn't know or has never been asked to know. And I don't think that applies. So I'm just curious to know now that there's this connection between New Life Church and Robert Morris being an overseer and Brady Boyd, being mentioned in the court affidavits as someone that did know. And now that this is in a RICO case, is there any potential fallout for New Life?
There could be. Think of it like this. It's very similar to the allegations against Robert Morris, where and all of his buddies at Gateway Church, that they were intentionally hiding the fact that he had SA'd a 12-year-old so that they could continue to run their church, make their money, sell their products, sell their books. So, similarly, in order to get Brady Boyd here, because we know that, this could be the argument. I'm just saying, this could
Sure.
be the premise. In
I'm
order
all
to
ears.
get him here, people know who he is. He's going to sell books. Yeah, we're aware that he's aware of this criminal act, and we're covering it up so that we can do these things and gain money. If there's an attorney out there and they have a class of people or even a couple plaintiffs that have standing, yeah, there could be a lawsuit against them.
And this would be, could this, let's assume, say, for example, there were families that attended New Life, for example, that also had SA cases either ongoing or were considering SA cases against New Life Church in particular. Could those cases receive any connection, momentum, benefit to the ongoing RICO case if there were SA cases at New Life independent of what Gateway was doing in this whole situation because of this RICO case that Gateway's involved in?
Yes. So I think not only the RICO case, it's also the other case that Cindy Clemenshire has, the defamation.
Okay.
So, you know, if they were New Life Church, if any of the elders, any of them, they knew of people that were coming to them and they were aware of crimes and they didn't do anything, you don't even need RICO. I mean, I'm aware of cases, I help victims get attorneys to file cases like that, right? That's just a civil suit. So they're opening themselves up to liability. Anybody is, right? If you are required to report and you don't, and then there's damages, there's a breach of that duty and there's damages, you're opening yourself up to liability. But yeah, I mean, that added thing that could happen is RICO against any of these churches that have any type of similar activity like we're seeing here. I think that this is the prototype. I think that we might see other churches have the same issue where they're going to get sued civilly and it's going to be under that RICO civil statute.
So once this RICO civil statute sees the light of day, and it's established that there were criminal elements that Gateway Church used to run their operations, and I know it's kind of a repetition of the previous question, but I wanted to get a little bit more detail on this. Could this potentially end the shield or uncover the legal protections that these churches have enjoyed for so long once this particular case establishes that there were criminal elements used, that it became evident that these were not pastors acting in good faith, but that these were criminals using the protections of a religious institution to conduct their criminal enterprise? Like, in other words, could this require churches to be like, hey, because of this case, there's now a legal requirement to a certain degree to reveal your financial books and to like a public company does? Can you foresee something like that happening?
It could be if the legislature makes some changes, but it wouldn't be from this church. It could have some persuasive effect, but it wouldn't be from that. But what we are going to see are churches that are going to have to stand up to attention and open their eyes and unplug their ears and see what's going on with this case and say, hey, should I change my behavior? You know, if they're
Yeah.
even thinking that, then maybe there's some issue there. But that's what the effect is, that these churches are going to have to think, "Oh my gosh, this is what's happening with Gateway. We might be doing something similar. We might be doing something not as bad, or we might be doing something worse. We could potentially be stuck with a lawsuit." Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a day of reckoning for the evangelical church in America, and especially this mega church universe where the mask, I think, is being pulled off, and Gateway is the first to expose themselves as a criminal organization hiding behind the guise of a religious institution
Right.
for the tax and legal protections. I don't think this surprises anyone that criminals are willing to go to any extent with evil intentions to be able to conduct their crimes. I know that's a hard pill to swallow. I know so many well-meaning believers sit in these churches and fall for all of it. But I think ultimately, we, the people, those of us who are sitting in these churches, don't need to wait for, and this is my editorialization of this. This isn't even a question. I'm just standing on my soapbox right now. I think that there's a day of reckoning that has come to the American church for us as the body of Christ to say, do we want to, continue to tithe in these churches, and do we want to continue to sit in these pews when these institutions are man-made structures where they have an incentive to grow as large as possible with no financial oversight? Maybe, just maybe, this is not the church that Jesus Christ intended. That's what I'm hoping for. The people will ultimately vote with their tithes and with their feet, and I'm hoping that this will create a trend that will be a reckoning for the structure of churches in this country. That's my hope. Would you
Yeah.
share in that
I
hope?
like that, how you said that, and I 100% agree. The power is with the people, right? And people
Hmm.
just seem to not realize that. And when you talked about that awakening, I think that that is happening because of shows like yours, podcasts like mine, and other people where we're talking about these issues. And
Right.
if we don't talk about it, people are not going to be aware of it. I'm in the business of trying to protect people, right? I mean, that's inherently how I am built. And I don't want my family to be damaged. That's how you have to look at it. If you're not aware of something, how can you protect yourself from something if you're not aware of it?
Yeah, you can't. Jason, anybody on the comment section asking anything interesting?
We have a comment that says if they are transparent churches, they should share their spending info. I would agree. I mean, I think that when you give your tithes and offerings and you give a portion of your money, there should be an expectation that you know where your money's going. I think that's an expectation that is very reasonable for the vast majority of the public. I think that when they give their dollars, they want to make sure that that money's going where it's supposed to. And we've seen for years nonprofits come under the limelight, under the microscope of, hey, why is 85% of your donations going to administrative costs? Same with school districts. And I think people are kind of fed up and they want to know that the money that they're being taxed for, the money that they're giving willfully, that money is actually going to where they say it's supposed to go. And so while I do echo the idea that, hey, we need to continue to protect religious liberties in this country, and I think that's a very important part, I don't see this case being a case that is attacking our First Amendment right to practice our religion freely. But I think that it could be a starting point to start inching towards taking away more rights from the American people and the church. But I don't see that happening quite yet. I don't know if you want to touch on that, Vanessa.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I don't think I agree with you. I don't think that this is infringing on free speech at all. And I don't think that there's, you know, br- dragging in the church and the pastors into court to, a day of reckoning of what they say from the pulpit. But we have a situation, just like you said before, of where they made statements that people relied on, and they relied on it and did something. They gave money, right? And had they not said that, they might not have given money. That's why they're here.
Yeah, there's a documentary that I want to point out to people. It's called The Religion Business. It's a 7-part docuseries directed by Emmy Award-winning Nathan Apfel. It basically goes right into this. He's exploring the issues of financial accountability and transparency within churches and ministries, and he's got some incredible content where he's out in the parking lot, I think, of Kenneth Copeland's church, and security's dragging him out like a criminal.
Yep.
And the guy is just asking, "Hey, where is the
The
tithe
tie's
money
going.
going?
I just
How
tied.
much?" How
Yeah.
much does the pastor make? I don't think that that's an inappropriate question
Right.
for a church congregant. I don't understand. It's incredibly what the Gen Z would call sus that these guys would just deflect this question. I mean, especially when their modus operandi is constantly going up on stage and saying, "Look at all these amazing things we're doing. Look at who we just gave all this money to. Look at all this amazing things we're doing." Many churches remind us every single time, and right before tithing starts, we are the church that uses your tithe money for our community. I mean, this is something that they literally brand themselves on. So it's incredibly suspicious that when we actually ask for the receipts, we ask for the books and say, "Okay, time to pony up. Where is this money actually going? How much does the pastor make? Does he have a housing allowance? Are there benevolent funds? Are there, slush funds? What does the budget look like?" And they just immediately want to shut you down. And then if you actually show up in their parking lot, they break the law. The security unlawfully detained Nathan, the director of religion business, in the documentary. So all of this just looks incredibly suspicious.
Yeah, it's very troubling. And I was thinking that too when you were talking about it before you brought it up. That's exactly what happened. He was asking, I just want to know where my ties go. And, you know, something is, even if something's not illegal, just like you said, it's sus or it's a bad look. Do you really want to be involved in a church that treats people like that?
No.
I- If if I was at that church and I saw that happening, I would never wanna go back to that church. I would have no interest whatsoever. I wouldn't trust them. It's a business. It's a mafia. You're strong-arming people.
Yeah, mafiosos they are. There's a verse that says in Second Timothy chapter 4, verse 3 through 4, and this is why I would like to end personally, is it says, "For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers, having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. And I would argue that that verse applies to the thousands of people that continue to sit in Gateway Church, to the
Yeah.
thousands of people that sit in New Life Church, that are a part of Facebook groups that say, I stand with Brady Boyd, a man who lied to his congregation. That when you're dealing with thousands of people in the church that are taking these positions, I do believe that the time has come. We are living in a 2 Timothy 4 generation, but we're having these shows and we're having these conversations because not everybody will be lost to this. There will be a remnant, and there will be some people who will look and see what's happening and will say, I'm not going to stay in this church anymore because this does not reflect the Great Commission. This is not the church that Jesus Christ had built nor intended to build.
I agree. That's so well said.
Thank you, Jason. Did you want to add anything before we close?
Yeah, I just think it only takes one, right? It only takes one of these cases, one of these allegations, one of these charges to make a difference and to ripple down the chain. And I hope that this is that one case. I hope that there's other pastors, other church leaders that are listening into this episode right now, or listening into whatever we do, and go, hey, we should take heed of this. And we said for a long time, in fact, we called out churches to start their own Doge, right? Department of Church Efficiency.
Doke.
But look at it and go, okay, are we spending our money wisely? I mean, these are dollars that are gifts. And you should be looking at them as if they're God's, not your own, right?
Right.
And they belong to the Lord. And so what you do with them, I think, is really critical. And
Right.
so just to spend it unwisely, to spend it however you feel, to throw it away on a private jet, to hurt it,
Multiple jets.
yeah, yeah, multiple jets in many cases. It's just absurd.
It is. It is. And it's funny because they'll say, "Hey, they'll admonish you from the pulpit. That's God's money you're holding back. You're stealing from God." But they're the quintessential hypocrite, because then what do they do with the money? They're keeping it for themselves. That's God's money. So you're stealing from God. And you're lying about it. If you're telling your congregation, "We take care of the community, we do this and that," and you're not doing it, then you're a liar. And you should be held to account.
Yeah.
Well, and we know that religious leaders will be held accountable for their actions.
James 3:1.
Yep, God will hold them to a high
Yeah.
standard. And I want to stand before the Lord and say that I've done everything in my power to honor Him in the best way possible. Not to say that I'm
Amen.
perfect, but that's kind of what I think. I tell my employees all the time. I go, before you make that decision, think about what it sounds like when you're sitting on a sitting on stand in a courtroom and you're having to explain your decision making. Does it make sense? Are you willing to do that? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, every action that you take could wind you up in a courtroom, and you have to just ask yourself, is the decision making process that I used, is that going to make sense to a judge?
Right.
Yeah. And speaking of courtrooms and court dates, we all have a court date with the judge one day,
That's right.
each and every
Most
one of us.
important. Great.
Well,
Yeah.
Vanessa, I want to thank you so much. It was an honor. We appreciate you coming onto the show. We really appreciate your heart. But the fact that it's paired with your brilliant legal mind is a weapon fashioned against the enemy. So thank you so much for your work.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You're very welcome.
And make sure that you go ahead and like and subscribe to this channel, and also go over to Vanessa Johnson's channel and support her as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Join us every week on Spiritual Uncertainty here on YouTube and Rumble. Thank you. God bless.
Peace.